Healthcare workshop. Today we're going to spend a couple of hours looking at how digital skills can be used in healthcare. So how you can use mathematical models and computer science to solve problems in medicine and in healthcare. Specifically today, what we're going to be looking at is something called biomarkers, and we're going to be seeing how we can solve problems in healthcare by looking at how can we improve diagnosis of diseases today. So that's what you're going to do today. You're going to look at some data, you're going to look at some diseases and see how can we make this better? How can we diagnose somebody better? So like I say, our goal is to help improve the diagnosis of disease. And to do that, what do we need? We need to look at patient data, right? We need to see what the disease is. We need to see what features it has, what kind of things the patient experiences, so we can use that and figure out how to diagnose somebody. But if we had just one person, for example, if we are trying to diagnose a cold, you might have things like a runny nose, a headache, a cough. If you've been diagnosed with all of these things, or these are symptoms you have with a cold, if I have a cold, maybe I've got a headache and a runny nose, but I don't have a cough. But that might mean that I still have a cold, but I just present a little bit differently. So we need to look at more than one person to make sure that we are covering all of the symptoms and that we can figure out whether everyone has all of the symptoms, whether someone can still have the disease and have different symptoms. So we really need to see a lot more data for this. So to successfully look at a disease and see what's going on, we need a big data group. We need a large data set for this to work. So if we have, like I say, for example, a group of people who have got a cold, these might have all different experiences. Some people might have a cold for 1 day or 2 weeks. They might have a runny nose, might be sneezing, they might have a headache. All these different people with all these different experiences of what it's like to have a cold. But in order to diagnose them, we need to compare them to people who don't have a cold, so we know what's normal, for example. So we need what is called a control data set. You might be familiar with this already in science classes if you've done any experiments. You always need a control group of people. So if our goal is to help improve diagnosis of disease, we need to take the data, right, from the people. So if you go to the doctors and you sit down and they're trying to figure out what's wrong with you, they might ask you initially a few questions. So can you give me some examples of things the doctor might ask you when you go and see them straight away? They might ask you things like your age, your sex, your BMI, which is your weight divided by your height, your body mass index. This isn't always accurate for things, but it's the measure that the NHS and people in medicine use. They might ask whether you're a smoker. They might measure your height. So these are some common things that doctors might just ask you generally when you go and see them straight away. But in order to look further, we might do some follow-up tests. So we might do things like blood tests. And this will show us what's going on inside your body. And doctors are looking for things called biomarkers. And a biomarker is just something that tells us that the body isn't quite right. So for example, if you are having an infection, you might have really high white blood cells in your blood test because white blood cells are what help fight off infections. So a high white blood cell count indicates that your body is fighting an infection. This is a biomarker. It tells us that something is wrong. So we might do blood tests and do multiple different tests on your blood sample to see if it tells us anything. So this is what a biomarker is. We're looking for something that tells us that something is wrong in the body. Now, hormones. Hormones can be a biomarker. So can anyone tell me anything about hormones? What do you know about hormones? Like I say, hormones can be a biomarker. And has anyone seen the film Inside Out? Maybe some people have. And we can consider hormones as these little people in our body, in our brain, that release these chemicals. And we might have happy chemicals. So we might have oxytocin, which is the love hormone, or dopamine, which we get when we are rewarded with something. We have endorphins, and we have serotonin. So these are some examples of happy chemicals or happy hormones in our body. But like I say, hormones aren't just little people in our body. They are chemicals. They are chemical reactions in our body, in our brain, that makes us feel how we feel. We may have happy hormones. We may have hormones that make us sad or make us hungry or wakes us up in the morning. Hormones are what controls who we are and helps us function. And they function in different ways and they function on cycles. So for example, we have a hormone that wakes us up in the morning. So when you set your alarm for school in the morning at 7 a.m, your body might naturally wake up at 7 because your hormone has now coincided for that time. Even when you're hungry, that's a hormone that helps us tell us we're hungry. If you eat breakfast, lunch and dinner at the same time every day, your body naturally gets used to that and it'll know at 12 o'clock you have lunch. We have hormones that make us grow and we have hormones that make us go to sleep at night. So when you get sleepy, that's a hormone that is telling you it's time to go to sleep. So all these hormones are working together to keep us functioning, and they work on a 24-hour cycle, something called a circadian rhythm. And now we have another hormone, which is called cortisol. This is the one that helps us wake up in the morning and is also known for regulating stress. And stress isn't always a bad thing. We need it in our fight or flight response. But also too much stress and cortisol can therefore negatively impact our health. Just like anything, too much of anything can also be bad for us. So today we're going to be looking at cortisol. And cortisol, like I said before, works on a circadian rhythm. It works on a 24-hour cycle, and it's responsible for waking us up in the morning. So cortisol spikes in the morning when we wake up around 7, 8 a.m. And then throughout the day, it slowly decreases all the way down to nighttime. So this is the cycle of cortisol throughout our body. So our goal today then is to use biomarkers and machine learning to improve and support diagnosis of disease. Machine learning is using computers and computer algorithms to help us learn from data and improve data and look at things we wouldn't be able to do normally by eye or by simple computer methods. So machine learning helps us look deeper into data. So that's what you're going to be doing today. So your first task is you've got your patient data set. You've got all these people and you've got all of their data. Like we said earlier, we've got age, sex, BMI, height, whether they're a smoker, and we've also got another point, their 8 a.m. hormone. So, like we sort of said earlier, we've got the cortisol that we're looking at, and cortisol spikes in the morning around 8 a.m. So we measured their cortisol at 8 a.m. in the morning. So we can see what that says about the patient too. So we've got a group of people who have got a disease, the patients, and we've got a control group, the people with no disease. So what you're going to do, you've got a card deck. You've got 80 cards and they've got patients and control data and they've got all of the information on these cards. You need to fill out a worksheet and collect all of the data from these people. It'll look something like this. You've got a sheet that'll look like this. You've got a sheet for control and you've got a sheet for patients. And you want to tally them up. So first of all, you need to see how many patients you've got, how many control people you've got. You want to record their ages. You want to record the sex, the BMI, the hormones. So you want to just record all of the data from all of your people on the cards. And at the end, you can see what the population is. You can see how many people are young or old, or whether they're shorter or taller. So you can see all of the data at the end. Once you've done this, once you've made sure you've got all of the data correctly, and it should all add up at the end, so make sure your numbers are correct, you should look at the end once you've tallied everything up and see, can you figure out, is there any key factors which might indicate that someone has a disease? So is there anything that stands out where the patients, they have a higher number of something than the control patients? Can you see if there's anything that stands out to you? Now you've completed the task, we want to see what did you find from it. So did everybody find the same thing? Your results should look something like this. So you can check quickly, see if you got everything correct. Maybe you've had some numbers differently. But what you should have found is that, the patients with disease, the purple patients, they have a higher BMI than the control patients. So people with the disease generally have a higher BMI. And also, the people with the disease also have a higher hormone level at 8 a.m. than the people with no disease. So these two things stood out. The other things, pretty even, smokers, the heights, they were equally male and female. The ages were kind of no significant difference between them. So the key things that stand out were the BMI being higher and the hormone being higher for people with disease. Hopefully everyone saw that, and don't worry if not, that's okay. The next task we're going to do is a coding task, and you're going to use the same data And now instead we're going to use it with computers, because you might agree that this took ages. This is faffy, this is long to do. You only had 40 control and 40 patients, but imagine doing this with the NHS where you've got thousands of people. We can't just be sitting there tallying up all the data points by hand. So we're going to use computers to do that, and we're going to see what else the computers can tell us about this data that we didn't see beforehand. So how can we use computers to make the analysis better? It'll be quicker. We can easily plot data and visualize the data. So looking at graphs rather than numbers is often easier to see things. And we can use algorithms to analyze data in a way we couldn't do by hand. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to plot some graphs, and we're going to plot the 8 AM hormone against the BMI data. But why are we going to do this? Why do we want to see this? So, for example, if we were looking at this bird and they were measuring the head length of the bird versus the body mass, so they plotted these two factors against each other, how heavy it was, the mass, and the head length of the bird. And we got data like this, which roughly can tell us that as the body mass increases, so does the head length, right? Roughly, you can kind of see that across the graph. So this is great, okay, that's fine. But if we actually look further and consider a third point, we can see the data in more detail. So if we have the same data, but actually we've split them into the male birds and the female birds, this tells us something a little bit extra that we didn't see beforehand. We could see that the male birds tended to have higher body mass and a larger head length than the female birds. Though the female birds, they had generally a broader spread of body mass. So they had a low body mass all the way up to a high body mass, but generally had a slightly lower head length than the male birds. So this is something we didn't see in this graph here, but by looking at it further, looking at more data points together, we could reveal this, and this tells us something then a little bit about it. So if we just found a random bird and we hadn't taken any data from it, if we measured it, the body mass, and we measured the head length, we could probably predict whether it was a male or female bird if we didn't have that information already. So these are the ways we can plot data in certain ways to reveal new things. So this is what we're going to do with the body mass index and the hormones. So now is the coding task, and you can get along with that. We can work in teams, you can do this on your own, and you can see how you can plot data, analyze data, and interpret data with some code. The final task of the day is looking at how we can combine science and art, and how we can use digital skills in artwork too. So, can we listen to our hormones? This is what we're going to be thinking about today, because we said earlier that hormones are on a rhythm, right? They are on a circadian rhythm. They're on a cycle throughout the day. So if we look at cortisol again, it's low in the early hours of the morning, and then it spikes when we wake up, and it goes down throughout the day. So we were thinking, if hormones are on a cycle, hormones are on a rhythm, what else is on a rhythm? Music and sound. So can we listen to our hormones? Can we convert our hormones to sound? So what we're doing today, we're going to look at 3 hormones. Our wake-up hormone, the cortisol that spikes in the morning, our sleep hormone, melatonin, which spikes in the evening, and then our hunger hormone called ghrelin, which spikes at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So what we can do is we can create a personalized sound that is unique to you based on when you wake up, when you go to sleep, and when you are hungry. So we're going to do this with a little code of script as well. This is not very complicated. All you need to do is have your times. So when did you wake up? When did you go to sleep? When do you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And how long did you sleep for? We've done this by converting each hormone into a sound. For cortisol, we've picked the chord A4. For melatonin, we're doing C5. And for ghrelin, we're doing E5 at these frequencies here. And when you play these over each other, it creates the chord A minor. This will be specific to you, depending on your wake-up time. So you can do this now with that script and see what kind of sound you produce based on your hormone rhythms.